There's a number that used to mean something in this country, 3 times your income. That's what a home was supposed to cost. Your parents knew it, their parents knew it, and the entire financial system was built around it. That number is now closer to 5.8. So today I'm breaking down exactly how the housing market became a machine designed to crush you, starting with the raw data, because the numbers are somehow worse than you think. The data, the rule of thumb was simple. You make 60 grand a year, you buy a home for 180. That ratio of about 3 to 1 held for decades. It was the foundation of middle-class wealth building in America, and it's gone. The national home price to income ratio now sits around 5.8, not in San Francisco, not in Manhattan, nationally. The median home costs nearly 6 times what the median household earns in a year. That's not a housing market, that's a hostage situation. Here's where it gets ugly. From 2000 to the early 2020s, median home prices rose 177%, household income rose 92%, adjust for inflation and it's worse, real incomes grew 8.5%, home prices grew 56%. That gap isn't closing, it's accelerating. And the generational damage is already done. Only 26.1% of Gen Z adults own homes, when the boomers were the same age, 40.5%. Almost half of Americans aged 18 to 29 now live with their parents. That's the highest rate since the Great Depression. But the data is just the symptom. The real question is why supply never caught up. And that answer involves something far more deliberate than market forces. Supply restriction, 75%. That's how much residential land in many US cities is zoned exclusively for single-family homes, which sounds like a boring planning fact until you realize it's basically an invisible structural barrier designed to keep housing supply low and prices high. By forbidding duplexes, triplexes, or any so-called missing middle housing, these rules cage entire neighborhoods in sprawling single-home lots that no young renter can hope to afford. Before you think this just blocks more homes in rich suburbs, hear me out. Each decade a city keeps exclusionary zoning in place correlates with a 1 to 2 percentage point drop in affordable housing stock. In the New York City metro area, that's over 137,000 low-cost apartments lost in just 20 years, all because of zoning. But it gets worse. This isn't just about where you can build. Supply restrictions spill over into poor neighborhoods, pushing rents up by about 24.8 to $27 per month every decade. That raises the number of cost-burdened renters by a full percentage point. So when the rich lock their doors with zoning laws, everyone else pays up. These zoning-heavy places also tend to be wealthier, whiter, and located closer to jobs, effectively hoarding opportunity by design. Meanwhile, permitting delays and discretionary reviews add insult to injury. Imagine a handful of neighbors having veto power over a new apartment building because it doesn't fit the character. That drag costs time and money, forcing developers to charge more or walk away, and all in exactly the areas where new housing is most desperately needed. Zoning isn't just a technical detail, it's the blueprint of exclusion disguised as neighborhood protection, and it poisons affordable housing for everyone while ensuring the wealthy keep their exclusive enclaves. Next up, how local politics and NIMBYism wield this power as a political weapon. NIMBYism as political force. Here's what nobody wants to admit about NIMBYs. They're not crazy, they're not even irrational, they're just doing math. The median wealth gap between homeowners and renters hit $390,000 in 2022. For most homeowners, their house isn't just where they live, it's their retirement plan, their kids' inheritance, their entire financial identity wrapped up in one asset. So when someone proposes building apartments next door, they're not fighting over aesthetics, they're defending their life savings. And here's the thing about leverage. Most homeowners bought with a mortgage, which means even a moderate price decline can wipe out a massive chunk of their actual equity. A 10% drop on a home you put 20% down on, that's half your investment gone. Of course they show up to every public hearing, but here's where it gets complicated. The people opposing new housing are disproportionately older, wealthier homeowners. The people who would benefit, low-income renters, young families, are systematically underrepresented. They're working. They don't have the luxury of attending a Tuesday afternoon zoning meeting. And the real twist? Under enough affordability stress, even renters start opposing new development. They see construction cranes and think gentrification, not relief. The system literally co-opts its own victims into defending it, but this goes beyond money. Jurisdictions dominated by single-family zoning don't just block housing. They block access to good schools, low crime, and strong job markets. They're not protecting property values, they're hoarding opportunity, and they're making sure your kids can't access the same chances their kids got. If you think that's a bleak picture of local democracy, wait until you see what happens when Wall Street enters the chat. Institutional investors. Here's the thing, you already know who the villain is supposed to be. BlackRock, Invitation Homes. Faceless Wall Street firms buying up every starter home in America and turning your future into their quarterly earnings report. Politicians on both sides love this one. It pulls through the roof. Voters here ban Wall Street from buying houses, and they light up like it's Christmas morning. But here's where it gets complicated. Large institutional investors, the ones owning more than 1,000 homes, control about 2% of the single-family rental market. 2%. One major firm's entire portfolio represents 0.1% of the nation's 93 million single-family homes, and institutional purchases have fallen over 90% since 2022. Many of these firms are actively selling off holdings, not acquiring new ones. So we've got an entire political movement, executive orders, proposed legislation, bipartisan outrage, all aimed at a group that owns less of the housing market than your local dentist with 3 rental properties, which is, not ideal if you actually want to solve the problem. Freddie Mac research concluded that investor purchases are at most a very modest contributor to home price increases. The actual drivers, underbuilding, low interest rates, rising construction costs, the boring stuff that doesn't fit on a campaign sign. Here's why this matters. Surveys show voters overwhelmingly support restricting Wall Street buyers, but those same voters give only middling support to building more market rate housing, which is the intervention economists actually recommend. Blaming institutional investors lets politicians signal responsiveness without confronting homeowner lobbies, without reforming zoning, without touching the power structure that actually controls supply. It's a perfect scapegoat, real enough to point at, small enough to never actually fix anything. But if you think the political convenience stops there, wait until you see how much your government directly profits from keeping prices high. Government benefits from high prices. Governments are far from neutral players in the housing market. They literally cash in on high home prices. In 2024, total state and local tax revenue in the U.S. smashed records at $2.95 trillion, with property tax collections hitting all-time highs thanks to soaring home values. Local governments rely on property taxes for more than half their income, 55% of their tax receipts. California alone generated $95.3 billion in local property tax revenue from $8.7 trillion in assessed property values. That's a fiscal lifeline tied directly to rising real estate prices. But it doesn't stop there. When homeowners see their house values climb, they feel wealthier and start spending more. This housing wealth effect stimulates consumer spending more powerfully than gains in financial assets, as owners tap into home equity to borrow and boost their wallets. The housing market acts as a secret economic engine, propping up the wider consumer economy by making people feel richer. Here's the kicker. That creates a massive structural addiction. The system needs high home values to keep the tax base healthy and public services funded. Politicians have huge incentives to keep prices inflated. When housing prices fall, as shown by the 2008 crash, foreclosures skyrocket, banks fail, and municipal budgets collapse. Public services get slashed just when citizens need them most. Rising home values deliver politicians fiscal windfalls and political rewards. They mean happier homeowners and voters who feel wealthier. This dynamic explains why affordable housing policies rarely get aggressive backing, because fixing prices threatens the entire property tax revenue structure governments depend on. The housing market isn't just about buyers and sellers. It's a giant financial ecosystem where governments quietly profit from unaffordable prices while fearing their collapse. Up next, we'll look at how this fuels the political power of homeowners themselves. The political economy. Here's the part that makes the whole thing basically unfixable. The people who benefit most from high housing prices are the exact same people who decide housing policy, not through conspiracy. Through turnout, mayoral elections in the United States average between 20 and 40% to turnout. That's the pool of people deciding zoning laws, development approvals, and density limits. And within that tiny pool, homeowners are massively overrepresented relative to renters. They show up, renters don't. And here's the thing, it's not just correlation. Research found that buying a home causally increases your likelihood of voting in local elections, especially on zoning issues. The act of purchasing property literally turns you into a more active political participant. The system creates its own defenders. Now look at what those defenders are protecting. The median wealth gap between homeowners and renters hit $390,000 in 2022. The average gap, over $1.37 million. These aren't people who are going to vote for policies that might lower their home values. They'd sooner eat glass. But here's where it gets really hopeless. You'd think renters would be the natural counterweight, pushing for more construction and lower prices. Turns out, no. Both homeowners and renters prefer price controls and demand subsidies over building more market-rate housing, despite supply expansion being the primary lever that actually works. Renters are fragmented, skeptical of the solutions that would help them, and less likely to show up on election day. Meanwhile, the jurisdictions with the most restrictive zoning are wealthier, whiter, and have better schools and job access. Their residents vote at higher rates to keep it that way. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed for the people who show up, but if the politics won't fix this, surely the market itself will eventually correct, right? Why the market won't correct? Here's the part where I kill your hope, I'm sorry. But somebody has to say it, the crash is not coming. The correction that makes homes affordable again, it doesn't exist, and I can prove it with one number. Type of 7 million. That's the housing deficit in the United States right now. After 2008, builders got spooked. Construction collapsed and never recovered to match population growth. For over a decade, the country simply did not build enough homes. That gap compounded every single year, so even if demand cooled tomorrow, there still wouldn't be enough houses. You can't crash a market that doesn't have enough product to sell, but here's where it gets elegant in the worst possible way. Remember those ultra-low mortgage rates from 2020 and 2021? Those same rates are now trapping owners in place. 68% of mortgage holders are locked in below 5%. If they sell and buy something new at today's rates, their monthly payment explodes, so they don't sell. The very policy that helped one generation buy is now choking supply for the next one, which is, not ideal. JP Morgan projects roughly 0% national price growth for 2026, not a crash, a plateau, after prices nearly doubled in the prior decade. Cool. So homes just stay expensive forever. That's the correction. Prices stop going up as fast. Congratulations. And even if a crash were mechanically possible, no policymaker would let it happen. A correction large enough to restore affordability would vaporize household balance sheets, crater property tax revenues, and risk repeating 2008. They'll intervene before it gets there. Every single time, the structural cause is millions of missing homes and a political system that prevents them from being built. Supply-side reform moves at the speed of local zoning boards full of homeowners who vote against density, which means it barely moves at all. But if you think being locked out of buying is the whole story, wait until you hear what this means for renters over the next 30 years. What this means for renters, long term. Take two people. Both are 30, same job, same income, same city. One buys a house, the other keeps renting because they couldn't scrape together a down payment. Fast forward 30 years and the gap between them isn't a car or a vacation, it's $390,000 at the median. Over $1.3 million at the average. No one retires with a paid-off asset and equity they can borrow against, sell, or pass down. The other retires with nothing but a landlord who wants more money next month, and that gap compounds every single year they're apart. A renter locked out at 35 who finally buys at 45 doesn't just miss 10 years of appreciation, they miss 10 years of mortgage amortization, 10 years of leverage gains on an asset they only put 5 to 20% down on. Making up that ground before retirement is statistically almost impossible. Only 32.6% of 27-year-old Gen Z own homes compared to 40.5% of boomers at the same age. At 35, only 56% of millennials own versus 61.5% of boomers. These aren't cyclical delays, these are permanent structural gaps. But here's where it gets darker. It's not just that renters miss wealth, it's that their children grow up in worse neighborhoods. Exclusionary zoning locks renters out of the zip codes with the best schools, the lowest crime, the strongest job networks. That's not a financial setback, that's intergenerational damage. And the political trap seals it. Homeowners vote at higher rates, especially in local elections where zoning is decided. If young renters disengage because they believe the system won't respond to them, the homeowner-dominated equilibrium becomes self-reinforcing indefinitely. Not all stories have a point. This one does, and it's not a happy one. The system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed, just not for you. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.